12 hours ago, NASA's Deep Space Network recorded something 240 million kilometers from Earth that no scientific framework can currently explain. The interstellar object known as 3-2 Atlas, originally cataloged as a rogue comet passing harmlessly through our solar system, did not pass. It stopped, it aimed, and then it built something. The probability of what it did occurring through any known natural process is 0.000014%. That number is not a margin of uncertainty. It is a statistical verdict. Because what the James Webb Space Telescope captured at 4:12 UTC was not outgassing, not fragmentation, not any form of passive cometary behavior. It was active construction. An object from outside our solar system was weaving a physical tether between two asteroids in the main belt, and the material it produced does not exist anywhere in our current scientific literature. Let that image settle for a moment. A 47.3-kilometer strand of organized molecular material stretching from 3-2 Atlas to asteroid 2011 MD, maintaining a perfectly stable diameter of exactly 4.2 meters across its entire length. Natural cometary ejecta does not behave this way. When a comet vents material, that material obeys entropy. It scatters outward in every direction, thinning and dispersing into the surrounding vacuum. What NIRCAM on the James Webb Space Telescope detected did the opposite. It held a linear trajectory. It anchored itself. It resisted the rotational shear of a moving asteroid without snapping. The tensile strength required to maintain structural integrity under those conditions describes a material that standard astrophysics says cannot be manufactured in the freezing void of deep space by a body composed of rock and ice. The European Space Agency did not wait for peer review. The Gaia spacecraft's astrometric sensors independently confirmed the telemetry, and ESA issued an emergency bulletin to the global scientific community within hours of the initial detection. Institutions of that scale and methodological conservatism do not bypass standard review protocols without compelling cause. The cause was right there in the data, and it was impossible to dismiss. The Atacama Large Millimeter Array in Chile cross-referenced the findings using sub-millimeter radio frequencies and returned the same result. 3 independent observatories, 3 separate detection technologies, one conclusion. An interstellar object was manufacturing and deploying a structural tether in real time, 240 million kilometers from the nearest human instrument capable of stopping it. What makes this categorically different from every prior anomalous detection in deep space observation history is not just the behavior itself, it is the precision. The extruded strand crossed the 47.3-kilometer gap and anchored to the surface of asteroid 2011 MD within 0.03 degrees of that asteroid's exact center of mass. Hitting a center of mass that precisely while both objects are moving on independent orbital trajectories from a hypervelocity approach requires real-time computational correction of a kind that human spacecraft achieve only through dedicated onboard guidance systems running continuous recalculation loops. 3-2 Atlas executed this without any observable external guidance mechanism, and it matched the asteroid's rotation period of exactly 3.41 hours to prevent the tether from immediately tearing itself apart upon contact. We are not looking at a chemical accident or a gravitational coincidence. We are looking at architecture, deliberate, calculated, physically structured construction executed in the vacuum of space by an object our models classified as inert debris. If that classification was wrong, then every assumption built on top of it is wrong too. And the data collected in the hours that followed the initial tethering event suggests that what we observed at 4:12 UTC was not the main event. It was the opening move. To understand how completely this event overturned our existing understanding, it helps to know what 3-2 Atlas was supposed to be before yesterday. The Asteroid Terrestrial Impact Last Alert System first detected it on August 14, 2025, and it was immediately flagged as our solar system's third confirmed interstellar visitor, following Oumuamua in 2017 and Borisov in 2019. From the outset, it carried 2 distinguishing characteristics that separated it from its predecessors. Its albedo, the fraction of sunlight it reflected, measured 88.4%, an unusually high value suggesting a very bright, possibly volatile-rich surface, and its velocity was 112 kilometers per second, fast even by interstellar standards. For 8 months, it behaved consistently with expectations. It vented carbon monoxide and other standard volatile gases. It followed a predictable hyperbolic trajectory through the outer solar system. Researchers monitored it, published preliminary analyses, and largely concluded that it was an active but ultimately conventional interstellar comet. More energetic than Borisov, but operating within the same basic physical parameters. That assessment held until April 17, 2026 at 1422 UTC. And then, in the span of a few hours, every prior conclusion became obsolete. The first sign of the transformation was thermal. The James Webb Space Telescope's mid-infrared instrument detected a sudden, violent concentration of heat at the object's leading edge. The temperature at that specific location jumped from 40 Kelvin, consistent with deep space ambient conditions, to over 1,500 Kelvin. That spike occurred within a focal region measuring precisely 12.5 meters across. To put that in thermodynamic context, generating that intensity of localized heat on the surface of a comet without an internal radioactive heat source and without the diffuse warming of close solar proximity has no natural explanation. Comets do not ignite microscopic forges on their surfaces. The physics of passive ice and dust sublimation does not produce focused, sustained, 1,500 Kelvin thermal events at a geometrically defined point. Something inside 3-2 Atlas produced that heat deliberately. What followed the thermal spike was the extrusion, a continuous stream of highly organized macromolecular material spooling outward from the heated focal point into the surrounding vacuum. The near-infrared spectroscopy from JWST analyzed the chemical composition of this material as it deployed. The results identified a hypercondensed carbon lattice structure interspersed with metallic silicates, accounting for 78.4% of the thread's total composition. This is not a material that forms spontaneously under any conditions present in the asteroid belt. Carbon nanostructures of that complexity require precise thermal management and molecular-level construction. They are the product of engineering, not chemistry. And the strand being produced was not a cloud, not a plume, not a spray. It was a thread, uniform in diameter, directional in trajectory, and purposeful in destination. The data from 3 independent sources left no interpretive room. What 3-2 Atlas began doing on April 17th was not a variation of known cometary behavior operating at the outer limits of our models. It was a category of activity our models do not contain at all, and the sequence of events that unfolded through the following hours, each one building directly on the last, made it increasingly clear that the tether itself was not the goal. It was the foundation. By the time the primary tether had fully anchored to asteroid 2011 MD at 1445 UTC on April 17th, the scientific teams monitoring the event had already shifted from analysis to something closer to disbelief. The strand had crossed 47.3 kilometers of open space, locked onto a spinning asteroid center of mass within 0.03 degrees, and was holding structural integrity under 33 billion tons of mechanical tension. At 1610 UTC, a second thread emerged from a different fissure on 3-2 Atlas's surface. This one did not simply extend toward the asteroid. It wove itself around the primary thread in a mathematically precise double helix pattern, the same geometric structure that governs the organization of biological DNA, now appearing spontaneously in a carbon silicate cable stretched across deep space. 3 hours after that, a third thread initiated and locked the 2 existing strands into a rigid braided cable. Each individual development compounded the statistical impossibility of the overall event. The probability of 3-2 Atlas naturally producing a localized 1,500 Kelvin thermal focal point stands at approximately 0.001%. The probability of that heat source forging a 47-kilometer carbon nanostructure approaches 0 under any conventional model. The probability of that structure anchoring within 0.03 degrees of an asteroid center of mass while both bodies move on independent trajectories is approximately 1 in 4.7 billion. Combining these as sequential outcomes of the same object in the same time window produces a number so vanishingly small that expressing it as a percentage is functionally meaningless. the director of the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, someone who has spent 3 decades analyzing near-Earth objects and complex orbital interactions, stated publicly that natural accretion models fail entirely to account for the telemetry. Then, on April 18th at 1:14 UTC, the character of the event shifted again. NASA's Deep Space Network antenna DSS-43 detected a new reading from the primary tether. The strand, which had been perfectly linear since anchoring, began to oscillate. Not randomly, not in the pattern of a cable vibrating under tension from external forces like solar wind or gravitational variation. The oscillation was a precisely timed acoustic wave traveling down the full 47.3-kilometer length of the thread at exactly 2.4 kilometers per second. An acoustic wave in the vacuum of space is not physically possible under standard conditions because sound requires a medium to travel through. The tether itself was the medium. 3-2 Atlas had constructed a transmission cable and was using it to send mechanical energy directly into the deep crust of asteroid 2011 MD. In practical terms, the object was not simply attached to the asteroid, it was probing it, using the braided carbon tether as a seismic instrument to interrogate the asteroid's internal structure. The closest human analogy is geophysical surveying, where researchers send controlled vibrations into the ground and analyze the returning wave patterns to map underground formations. 3-2 Atlas was doing something functionally equivalent at cosmic scale, with a cable it had manufactured itself, anchored to a target it had selected from millions of kilometers away. And at exactly 3:45 UTC, the tension on the braided tether increased by 14.2%. The object fired a directed burst of ionized gas from its trailing edge, shifting its own trajectory by 0.08 degrees. A calculated burn designed to pull the tether taut. It was using the asteroid as an anchor point for a controlled slingshot maneuver. Or it was applying measured force to alter the asteroid's orbital path. While the James Webb Space Telescope remained fixed on the primary tether connecting 3-2 Atlas to asteroid 2011 MD, the Atacama Large Millimeter Array was conducting a broader scan of the surrounding region's background radiation field. What its Band 7 receivers detected, buried in the sub-millimeter radio frequencies at 7:22 UTC on April 18th, was not visible in any prior data stream and had not been predicted by any observational model. The event at the primary tether was not isolated. It was a trigger. The moment the acoustic wave from 3-2 Atlas reached asteroid 2011 MD and penetrated its crust, the asteroid responded, not by fracturing, not by shifting on its orbital path, but by extruding. 6 new carbon silicate threads, each measuring exactly 4.2 meters in diameter, the same precise diameter as the original tether, emerged simultaneously from the surface of 2011 MD and shot outward at 112 kilometers per second. Each one connected to a different asteroid in the surrounding local cluster. And the angular spacing between the 6 secondary tethers was exactly 60.00 degrees, a mathematically perfect hexagon constructed in open space, spanning approximately 400,000 kilometers from edge to edge. The geometry is the detail that transforms this from a remarkable anomaly into something that demands an entirely different category of explanation. Natural processes do not produce perfect hexagons. Crystal formation can produce hexagonal molecular arrangements at microscopic scales under specific chemical conditions, but those conditions require a constrained environment, controlled temperature gradients, and time. What the ALMA array recorded was 6 simultaneous tether deployments from a moving asteroid, spaced at identical angular intervals, connecting to 6 separate target bodies at matched velocities, executed in minutes in the vacuum of space at a scale of hundreds of thousands of kilometers. The calculus required to place 6 anchors at perfect 60-degree intervals while accounting for the independent orbital velocities of 6 different asteroids has no natural parallel. It is the output of a planning system, not a chemical reaction. Within 2 hours of LMA confirming the hexagonal structure, NASA and ESA acted in concert for the first time under an emergency planetary defense classification. All raw, optical, and infrared telemetry from the James Webb Space Telescope and Hubble's Wide Field Camera 3 was immediately classified. The data feeds went dark. In the full history of international space cooperation, spanning decades of shared observation, joint missions, and open data protocols. A simultaneous dual-agency blackout of that scope under a planetary defense designation had never occurred. The institutional response is itself a form of evidence. When the agencies responsible for monitoring threats to Earth classify the data stream from our most capable telescopes within hours of a detection event, the magnitude of what those telescopes observed can be inferred from the severity of the response. The three frameworks that scientists and officials in that classified briefing were working through are the same three that the observable evidence supports. First, an unknown natural phenomenon operating by physical principles we have not yet identified, which would require a fundamental revision of vacuum thermodynamics and material science. Second, a dormant automated probe, a von Neumann architecture machine launched by an unknown civilization that woke from a long transit, identified raw material resources in our asteroid belt, and initiated a pre-programmed harvesting sequence. Third, an active, directed system intentionally constructing a large-scale geometric array with a specific operational purpose. The data does not eliminate any of these, but it heavily weights the analysis toward the latter two. The question that the classified NASA briefing at 6 o'clock UTC this morning carefully avoided putting into writing is the same question that every piece of observational data collected since 4:12 UTC has been building toward. The hexagonal tether network spanning 400,000 kilometers of the main asteroid belt is not static. It is not a completed structure sitting passively in space. It is synchronizing. The mechanical tension across all 7 tethers, the original strand connecting 3-2 Atlas to asteroid 2011 MD, and the 6 secondary threads radiating outward from 2011 MD to the surrounding cluster, is being actively modulated. The acoustic frequency traveling through the primary cable is increasing at a measured, consistent rate. The braided structure is tightening. And the geometric orientation of the hexagonal array is rotating on a calculated axis. That rotation is the detail that shifted the Pentagon's emergency briefing from technical analysis to strategic assessment. The hexagonal array's axis of rotation is not aligned with the local gravitational gradient of the asteroid belt. It is not tracking the sun. It is not following any orbital reference frame that corresponds to a natural resonance phenomenon. The array is rotating to face Earth. In exactly 14 hours from the time this data was confirmed, the hexagonal structure will achieve perfect geometric alignment with Earth's current orbital position. Every tether in the network will be oriented toward this planet simultaneously. The physics of what a structure like this could do in that configuration depends entirely on what it is. If the 7 tethers are functioning purely as mechanical connectors, holding the asteroid cluster in a fixed geometric relationship, then alignment with Earth produces no immediate physical consequence. The structure exists, rotates, points, and that is the extent of it. But if the tethers are functioning as the elements of a phased array, a coordinated system where multiple synchronized emitters combine their output to produce a directed, amplified signal, then the geometry changes everything. A phased array operates by timing the emissions from each element so that the waves reinforce each other in one specific direction and cancel each other in all others. The result is a highly focused, directional beam of energy far more powerful than any individual element could produce alone. 6 perfectly spaced elements arranged in a mathematically precise hexagon connected by a central node, synchronized through acoustic wave transmission. That is a phased array, and it is currently rotating to point at Earth. Dr. Avi Loeb at Harvard University, who has argued consistently for years that unexplained interstellar objects deserve serious analysis as potential artificial constructs, reviewed the preliminary ALMA data and stated that the synchronized mechanical behavior of the tether network is consistent with coordinated field generation. When the Harvard astrophysicist who first proposed the artificial hypothesis for Oumuamua applies that same framework to a structure orders of magnitude larger and more complex, the scientific community cannot dismiss it on procedural grounds. The evidence demands engagement, and the evidence is getting harder to look at directly. The 3 possible outcomes that follow the 14-hour alignment window are not equivalent in their implications. If the array transmits a signal, the content of that signal determines everything: communication, mapping, energy transfer, or or something with no human analog. If the array applies directed mechanical force at a distance, the target and magnitude determine the consequence. And if the alignment passes without observable effect, then the rotation itself was the data point, a demonstration of capability rather than an exercise of it. In none of these scenarios is Earth a passive bystander. In all of them, something built from outside our solar system using our own asteroid belt as raw material has made a choice about where to point. Let us be precise about what is confirmed and what is approaching. The confirmed observational record, verified independently by NASA, ESA, and LMA, establishes the following sequence without ambiguity. On April 17, 2026, 3-2 Atlas generated a localized 1,500 Kelvin thermal event at a 12.5 meter focal point on its surface and extruded a 47.3 kilometer carbon silicate tether to asteroid 2011 MD, anchoring within 0.03 degrees of the asteroid's center of mass. The tether organized itself into a braided triple helix structure over 3 successive deployments. An acoustic wave was transmitted through the primary cable at exactly 2.4 kilometers per second. Upon reaching 2011 MD, the asteroid extruded 6 secondary tethers simultaneously, spaced at exactly 60-degree intervals, connecting to 6 surrounding bodies and forming a hexagonal array 400,000 kilometers across. NASA and ESA classified all JWST and Hubble telemetry under Emergency Planetary Defense Protocol within 2 hours of ALMA's confirmation. The array is now rotating. Alignment with Earth's orbital position occurs in 14 hours. None of these points are preliminary readings awaiting confirmation. None are the output of a single instrument requiring independent verification. Every element of this sequence has been cross-referenced by multiple agencies using separate methodologies and returned consistent results. The data is solid. What remains genuinely open is interpretation, and the range of interpretations available has been narrowing steadily since 4:12 UTC yesterday morning. The question that carries the most immediate practical weight is not what 3-2 Atlas is, where it came from, or how it manufactured carbon nanostructures in the vacuum of space. Those are questions for the months and years of analysis that follow this event. The question that matters in the next 14 hours is what the alignment is for. Because a structure of this precision and scale, built over less than 24 hours from materials that do not naturally form in this region of the solar system, rotating on a calculated axis to face a specific planet at a specific time, is not doing so accidentally. Whatever the intended function of the hexagonal array, communication, resource processing, directed energy, or something outside our current conceptual vocabulary, the orientation toward Earth indicates that this planet is relevant to that function. What is perhaps most significant about everything that has happened in the past 24 hours is not the technical impossibility of the tether, the scale of the hexagonal network, or even the classified data blackout. It is the fact that 3-2 Atlas has been in our solar system for 8 months, behaving entirely normally, and then changed its behavior completely and irrevocably within a single 24-hour window. Whatever condition triggered that change, proximity to the asteroid belt, a specific orbital configuration, a signal received from somewhere we are not monitoring, was met recently. The transition from passive interstellar comet to active constructor was not gradual. It was a switch, and switches, in engineered systems, are thrown deliberately. In 14 hours, the array aligns. The Atacama Large Millimeter Array is collecting data continuously. The Deep Space Network's antenna systems are tracking every measurable parameter of the structure's ongoing synchronization. Whatever the next 14 hours produce, a transmission, a pulse, a demonstration, or a silence that itself requires explanation, this is the most consequential observational window in the history of human astronomy. If you want to be here when that data breaks, subscribe right now and turn on notifications, because the moment the alignment occurs and the first confirmed readings come in, this channel will have the full analysis ready. Share this video with anyone who needs to understand what is happening in our solar system tonight. This story belongs to everyone, and the next 14 hours will determine what chapter comes next.